Hello my amazing people, and welcome back to my channel. If you're back, if you are new, welcome to my channel. I'm Shayna and I have another true crime case for you today. Just my usual disclaimer, this is all information that I have found online that I've compiled into a video for educational and entertainment purposes. Back in the 1980s in Grand Rapids, Michigan is where the love story between two teenagers began, and these teenagers' names were Glenna Johnson and Marty Duram. The two of them had friends that kind of hung out in the same area, in the same neighborhood, but the two of them actually weren't friends together, like they hadn't met each other yet. But one night, Marty is out with his cousin Scott, and they're fixing up this old pickup truck. He was a really hands-on kind of guy, and this girl named Glenna walks up to him and just begins chatting with him. And she's not talking to both. She's not talking to Scott too. She's just talking to Marty. And Scott can tell almost right away that Marty is interested in Glenna, and he's excited to possibly get to know her. And the weekend after that, actually on Saturday, they decide to go on a date, and they go to the movies, a drive-in movie theater, and the two of them had started this really cute teenage love affair. And it was really interesting because the two of them were so different. Both of them were actually middle children in their family, which was cool. They both had two siblings, but Glenna was kind of just a family girl. She didn't really do much outside of being with her family. She was like a second mom to her youngest sibling because she was 9 years older than her little brother. And Marty was also kind of quiet and reserved, but he was an all-American kind of kid. He liked fishing and hunting and spending time with his cousin Scott, and he was really to himself. But the two of them together, it was really cute because they were so different but so alike, and they were just two peas in a pod. But one day Scott says that he and Marty were going out for fishing and hunting again, and he asked how things were going with Glenna, and Marty actually told him that the two had split up and decided to part ways. But not long after they parted ways, Glenna actually ended up getting married relatively quickly. When she was only 17 years old, she got married to a man who was 5 years older than her. So the dynamic between them was kind of odd because he was already an adult and she hadn't even reached 18 yet, but they ended up making it work for some years. They had some kids between the two of them. I believe they had 3 children, and Glenna was a stay-at-home mom. She loved being a mom. That's what she devoted her life to, taking care of her kids, taking care of her home, and taking care of her husband. And Marty kind of followed a similar path. In 1991, he married a woman named Christina, and they were a young couple, and Christina had 3 of Marty's children before she even turned 20 years old. Like, their romance was fast, it was young, it was really quick moving, but it was a good time. Like, they were in the honeymoon phase while all of these huge milestones were happening, so they were happy and excited and just looking forward to all of the things that life brought them. They had their ups and downs like any relationship, but generally Christina and Marty had a really good and happy marriage. One night in 1995, when Marty was driving home from work, he got into a really bad car accident, and this isn't a normal fender bender. He was driving through a green light at an intersection in a small car when a large truck came, ran a red light, and smashed into his car. But the truck was so big in comparison to his vehicle that it literally ran over his car and crushed his car. And he was in such bad shape. He had brain damage, he had 2 punctured lungs, his pelvis was shattered, he had a broken jaw, he had bruises on his heart. I didn't even know it was possible to have a bruised heart. And his condition was such that people weren't even sure if he was gonna make it. Like, people were almost certain that he was not going to make it. He actually was brain dead for 5 minutes after the accident, but they were able to get him back. And when they got him back and there was brain activity, he was still in a coma for some weeks, and he finally came to. And people were surprised throughout each step. They were surprised that he survived the accident. They were surprised that he came out of his coma. And now they weren't sure what to expect from Marty now. They didn't know if he was going to be able to walk, if he was going to be paralyzed, if he was going to be able to speak. They didn't know what his personality would be like. So when he did wake up, everybody was kind of anticipating the Marty that they were going to get. And it was really unfortunate because physically and mentally, Marty was affected. He didn't remember most of his recent life. He wasn't sure that Christina was actually his wife, and he had lost a lot of his recent memories. and his personality changed. He was more controlling. He was more dark now. He had a darker sense of humor. He was a little more just cold and hard to connect with. And not only that, but his physical injuries were extensive. It took a year and a half for him to get to a place where he could finally function fully on his own. And even when he did get to that place, he struggled with chronic pain for his full life. And Christina stuck with him. You know, she tried to make things work for the year and a half that he was rehabilitating. She stuck by his side. She took care of him. She made sure that he was fed and bathed and dressed, and she was really hoping that things would eventually get back to normal. But when he did physically get back to normal, but his personality hadn't come back, and the Marty that she knew and loved wasn't there anymore. She said that she just fell out of love, and it wasn't something that she wanted, but this wasn't the man that she married, and she actually decided that it was best for them to part ways. When the two of them split up, Marty decided to go and purchase a home of his own, and he was really excited about this home because it was something that was all his. It was a house on a nice piece of land, and it was something he was really proud of and that he really took the time and energy to keep in good shape. And it was ironic because around the same time that he and Christina got their divorce, he found out that Glenna and her husband were also going through a divorce at the exact same time. And the two of them actually reconnected, and they felt like this was just some serendipity that was just too ironic to not notice, and they almost took it as a sign from the universe that they were meant to be together. And a couple months of dating, Glenna actually decides to move out of her family home with her husband and her children into the home with Marty, and they're basically at a point where they're like, I guess it's time to start this life together. So this is around 1996, 1997, and Glenna didn't want to uproot her children, make them completely start over, and her husband getting a divorce was enough of a transition for them. So she decided that it would be best for her to just move out. And when she moved into the house with Marty, so had his two sons, two of his children, and they also had an African gray parrot named Bud who lived with them as well. So they were excited for this new chapter. They did everything together, literally every single thing. Marty and Glenna would go fishing together. They would go to the casino when they had some extra money to spend. They went on nature walks. They were inseparable. Everybody knew the two of them to be this perfect couple. But they also had their downsides. They had their ups and downs just like everyone else. The remaining personality effects from the accident still were there for Marty, and he was controlling, and he wanted to know everything that Glenna was doing at all times. And that definitely put a strain on their relationship, and it put a strain on his relationship with his kids. His sons actually ended up moving out. So fast forward to May of 2015, one of the couple's neighbors noticed that the two of them haven't been out and about. She hasn't heard from them. She hasn't seen them. So she goes over to their house a couple days in a row, just knocks on the door, doesn't get an answer, tries to peek through the windows but can't really see much. And on the third day, she goes back over and she actually jiggles the front door handle and realizes that the door is unlocked. So she makes her way into the house. She's calling them, trying to find Marty or Glenna, and when she can't find either one of them, she starts to get worried. So she goes further into the house, and in their bedroom she actually finds the two of them with blood all over the place. So she runs and notifies authorities right away that her friends are dead, and police arrive on the scene shortly thereafter. When police get to the scene, they believe that both Marty and Glenna are deceased, but upon closer inspection, they actually check for a pulse almost an hour after they arrive on the scene, and they realize that Glenna actually is not dead. She's actually still alive. So they rush her to the emergency room and try to get her care as quickly as possible, but unfortunately Marty was declared dead on the scene. Marty had multiple gunshot wounds and Glenna had 2 gunshot wounds to the head, and the house was in complete disarray. It was a disaster, but there was no sign of forced entry. They couldn't find any windows that were broken into. The door looked like it had just been opened like normal. It wasn't broken into. But they did find a firearm actually under the couch in the living room that they believed to be the murder weapon. So they took that in for evidence, and they began trying to piece together what could have happened here. Who would have wanted to do this to this couple that was loved by so many? And Glenna, luckily she was alive, but she was in a comatose state, so she was going to be their main witness, but they had no way of getting any information from her at this point. So they have to start and open an investigation as if Glenna is not going to make it, because at this point it was not looking like she was going to. Police begin their investigation, and one of the first things that they are suspecting in nearly the beginning is that Marty and Glenna were targeted by someone who was purchasing painkillers from them. So Marty and Glenna had been selling Marty's painkillers. He was taking a really small amount and getting by with that, and he was selling and profiting off of the rest of them, and he was making upwards of $4,000 per bottle. The family knew about this, and Marty's cousin Scott had actually warned him and said, hey, just make sure you're careful. You shouldn't really have people come to your house to buy these things, at least meet them somewhere. But Marty was very stubborn and set in his ways, and he and Glenna would allow people to come to their home to purchase the painkillers. And apparently there was an opiate issue in this area at the time, as it was, and Marty and Glenna were unfortunately contributing to make some sort of a profit. So police are thinking that whoever came in to purchase the painkillers, maybe something went wrong and it ended up being a double murder or attempted double murder, and the person tried to hide the gun under the couch before they ran out of the house, which seemed like a reasonable possibility since there was no forced entry. Marty and Glenna would have let whoever this person was purchasing drugs into the house at their own will. But some people close to Marty really started to suspect that Glenna had more to do with this than the police maybe initially wanted to believe. Justin, one of Marty's sons, said that Glenna and Marty used to fight all the time, and they would say things like, oh, I'm gonna kill you, I'm gonna hurt you. But that Glenna was always more serious than Marty, that she was kind of a little crazy, and he actually believed and had said prior to this whole incident that if anything ever happened to his dad, it was Glenna. So the family is starting to have this weird feeling about Glenna in this whole situation before the police even did. So after police take their time to do their investigation, get everything they need to collect from the crime scene, they allow Marty's children to go into the house to look for any valuables that he might have, to take his parrot, Bud, and give him a new home. And one of Marty's daughters takes it upon herself to go sifting through paperwork in the house. She feels like she'll be able to find something that maybe can help pin this on Glenna, or at least prove that Glenna had something to do with this. And as she's sifting through paper, she finds a manila envelope. Inside of this envelope, there is a letter. There are actually multiple letters written in what is believed to be Glenna's handwriting to her children, saying that she was sorry, that her children were the best thing that ever happened to her. She's sorry she couldn't be a good mom for the past 12 years. And this was interpreted by Marty's children to be an indicative of a murder-suicide or an attempted murder-suicide, that Glenna was writing these letters as a goodbye, as a farewell, because she knew that she was going to kill her husband and then kill herself. So the kids took these letters and turned them over to police, and then the narrative in the police department at this point this is when it seems like the narrative started to change. They went from more of a, okay, maybe this was an attempted robbery or drug deal gone wrong, to maybe Glenna actually does have more to do with this than meets the eye. The only issue with the theory of Glenna being involved in shooting Marty and then shooting herself is that the weapon was found in a different room in the house under the couch. That is the only issue, because if she were to shoot herself, would she then have the ability to walk into another room, lay down next to her husband after hiding the weapon under the couch? It seems like a bit much for someone who has 2 bullets in the head. So as police are doing their digging, they find out a couple more things. One of those things being that Marty and Glenna's home was on the verge of foreclosure. And when I say on the verge, I mean like the same week that this happened was when their home was due to be foreclosed. Within a day of when this happened was when their house was due to be foreclosed. Apparently they owed $5,000 on their mortgage that they had not been paying. And when all of this is being uncovered, we find out that Marty had basically trusted Glenna with all of the bills. So she was the handler of the money in this house. And that was surprising to Marty's children because they knew the kind of controlling person that he was, just in the sense that he wanted everything to be perfect. He was very particular. He was never late on payments. He liked to make sure his bills were paid on time or in advance. So they were surprised to find out that things were shifted and Glenna was in charge of all the money now, but they were sure that she had to be in charge of the money if they were behind on the mortgage, and that is exactly what was happening. So by the looks of it, Glenna had let things get a little out of control and was maybe now looking for an escape route, because not only were the finances not in good shape, she had been gambling in excess. She was gambling pretty much all of their money away. Maybe not all of it, because they did have some saved up that Marty knew about, but all of the money that he couldn't readily see, she was gambling away. And they know this because they looked at statements and saw how much money, which is a lot of money, she was gambling away, which is crazy. But it really kind of drove the narrative that Marty's family was starting to have, which was she killed him to escape this. She wrote the letters to apologize to her children because she felt like a failure after ruining their finances, and she felt like it would be worse to tell Marty about the fate of their home than it would be to kill him. This is the way that Marty's family is really thinking at this point because of the way the cards are falling. And last but not least, police find in Glenna's phone records that she had searched shortly before the shooting of Marty. She had searched up information about the firearm that was used in the shooting. That specific gun she had looked up information on right before she had shot Marty. So this is really just starting to look awful for Glenna, and police are piecing together their theory of what they think happened that night. Police theorize that due to Glenna's excessive spending and gambling and their impending doom and foreclosure on their home, she writes these letters to her children saying that she was sorry and that she felt like she was a bad mom, and then she takes it upon herself to look up information about the gun that actually belonged to Marty. She uses this firearm to shoot Marty in the bedroom. She walks to the living room where she shoots herself twice in the head. She slides the gun under the couch and then walks to the bedroom and lays down next to her husband in an attempted murder suicide. And you may be thinking still the same thing. How is it possible that she was able to shoot herself and then walk to another area of the home? And the police talked to a neurologist who said that the way that she was shot in her head, it wasn't fatal. She didn't hit any major nerve. So it was not unlikely that she would be able to walk to another part of the room and then collapse and lay there. So this is the theory that police actually are going with at this point, and they are pretty much sure that Glenna is the person behind all of this. Marty's funeral was held 10 days after his death, and it's interesting because in the obituary, Glenna wasn't included. Glenna's family wasn't included at all. Like, Marty's family were sure that she was the person who did this to him. And it's interesting because pretty much all of Marty's family believed that Glenna was the person who did this, except for the one person that he in many ways was closest to, who was Scott, his cousin. Scott did an interview, basically said they were closer than brothers. They were closer than any family could ever be. And Scott truly believed that Glenna loved Marty too much to ever hurt him. So it's interesting to see that the person closest to Marty doesn't feel like Glenna did it, but the other people who are automatically close to Marty, his children, his ex-wife, they all feel like she did it. When Glenna came to from her coma, police were finally able to question her and present all of the evidence that they had against her, and she very adamantly denied that she had anything to do with the murder of her husband. But she also says she doesn't remember anything from that night. So my question is, okay, you deny that you had anything to do with it. You say you love your husband, you would never hurt him, he was your everything, you couldn't picture your life without him, but you also can't remember anything from the night. So is it possible that you actually did it, but you don't remember due to the brain injury that you sustained from shooting yourself? I don't know. I wasn't there. I'm just saying, how can you say you didn't do it and then also say you don't remember? So there's something else we have to talk about, and this is perhaps the most strange part of this case, this is the part of the case that gained this case notoriety. I said case like 13 times there, sorry. But this is what made Marty's case so famous, if you will. This is what had it in the news, in the headlines, and that is this. Remember I told you that Marty had an African gray parrot named Bud? Well, these parrots live a very long time. They can live up to 90 years in the wild, up to 50 years in captivity. So this parrot had been a ride or die for Marty for a long time, and this parrot was in the house the night that all of this took place. After Marty's death, his unfortunate death, Bud the parrot went to go live with Christina, his ex-wife, but Bud was there, and like I said, they live a long time, and these parrots are very smart. So they have the cognitive ability of a 5-year-old human child, which is impressive for a bird. You wouldn't think that a bird would be able to be that smart, but they actually are very smart, and watching videos of them, it's quite awe-inducing to watch them. Like, they are smart and they remember things, they can identify colors, they can follow commands. It's quite incredible, really. But Bud the parrot, after this whole thing happened with his owner Marty, who he was very close to, they established really strong bonds with their owners. Bud was traumatized, and Christina noticed that there were nights that he was up and he was making a lot of noise, and it seemed like he was reciting the same thing over and over again, but only at nighttime. And she's like, what is he saying? He keeps saying the same thing over and over, and it sounds like it's rehearsed. It sounds like he's saying the same set of phrases over and over around the same time. So one night she decides, okay, maybe he's stressed out after being separated from his owner. Totally reasonable. But she decides, I'm gonna record what he's saying because it sounds again like he's saying the same thing, so I'm gonna try to figure out what he's saying. So she takes out her phone and she records him one night, and the recording is so eerie. So when she breaks it down and she listens to what he's saying, it is very clear, and in the audio recording, I can hear it myself. It's very clear that Bud is reenacting a conversation between two people, specifically a man and a woman. He's doing a very clear male voice, and he's doing a very clear female voice, and it's eerie because this is a parrot saying human words. But we all know parrots do that, so I'll carry on. The main thing that Bud says in this recording is, "Don't effing shoot." And he says it in a voice that is reminiscent of Marty's voice. And he goes on this rant. It sounds like a woman arguing with a man, saying no, shut up, different things. And then the last thing that Bud says is, "Don't shoot," before he stops the rant, and then he goes quiet. So Christina immediately thinks, again, she's one of those people who from the beginning felt like Glenna had something to do with Marty's death. Christina's thinking, oh my goodness, Bud is reenacting the night that Glenna killed Marty. And she obviously sends the video to the police department, and of course they can't actually use that as evidence, but if anything, it gave an unofficial confirmation of what they had theorized this whole time. And you might think, oh, well, you can't just take a bird's word for it, which you can't. It's possible maybe this was something from a TV show he had heard or some other conversation that he had heard. But the likelihood is not, it's not likely. It's not likely because African parrots, African gray parrots, they can experience emotional trauma. Like I said, they get very attached to their owners, and to lose your owner as an African gray parrot apparently is very traumatic. And he would recite this conversation that is believed to be between Marty and Glenna around the same time that the incident most likely happened, because he was reliving the night that Marty died because he was so traumatized by losing his owner. And it's interesting because the male words and what he's saying that is believed to be what Marty was saying are so much clearer than the female voice and what he was saying. Like when he's doing what's believed to be what Glenna was saying in the conversation, it's kind of muffled and it's hard to decipher what he's saying. But then when he does Marty's voice, like you hear him say, "Don't effing shoot." It's creepy. It gives me chills. I just got chills. But Bud's whole role in this really sensationalized the case, and it was in the news all over the place. People were talking about this like crazy because it's like, oh, African gray parrot serving as witness in murder trial, which obviously a parrot can't serve as a witness. But it's interesting because we know how intelligent they are and we can't take his word for it, but we kind of can, because he can't make it up. Like he can't lie. He's a bird, you know? But in June of 2016, Glenna Duram was arrested for the murder of her husband, Marty Duram, and she was found guilty. And there are some mixed feelings on this case. There's mixed feelings, and I can see why, because the whole aspect of her shooting herself and then walking to another room, it's unsettling to think of that happening. And to maybe, when you look at all the other evidence that's kind of circumstantial that leads you to believe that maybe she's guilty, but then you remember, like, could she really shoot herself in the head and walk to the other room? The jury decided that she could. And when they found her guilty, they felt like she had a fair trial, and that was it. So it's very interesting. Honestly, I don't know where I stand. I'd be interested to hear what you guys think. If you think that Glenna did it, or if Glenna is innocent. What do you think? I don't know. I really don't know in this one, but I feel like Bud the Parrot, if anything, he is the reason that I might believe that she did it. Like, I'm not even gonna lie. If Bud's part of this wasn't in it, I would kind of be like, no, I don't think she did it. But just hearing his part of it, I'm like, maybe. But that is where I'm going to end this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful morning or afternoon or evening, depending on what time it is when you watch this video. You already know what I'm going to say. If you made it this far, you are loyal. You really are, and I appreciate you. Thank you again so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Peace.